Okay, thanks, Sally. We have a real treat for everyone here this morning with something kind of new for a district meeting. This is going to be a community leader optimist panel. And it's my pleasure to introduce our three panelists. When I call your name, if you'll please come forward and have a seat up front, and we'll get the show on the road. Sid Stewart. Sid Stewart is currently a senior marketing strategist for Town Square Media in Bismarck. Sid grew up on a cattle ranch in southwestern North Dakota. That ranch still exists and is a fifth-generation operation. Sid's path was led to broadcasting after hours of riding the fences and checking cattle, with plenty of time to talk to himself.
Still does.
With a very forgiving audience of livestock. After college at Dickinson State and in Minneapolis, Sid took a job in Mandan as the overnight guy on Super Talk 1270 AM. And the rest is history as he grew through the ranks to eventually manage KFYR and Y93 Radio, Clear Channel Communications, Cumulus Broadcasting, and Town Square Media with over 43 years in the business. Sid loves to spend time with his wife Pamela, a retired teacher, and their dog Hamish and cat Eva. He has two married daughters in Minneapolis and one grandson, Rowan Stewart Kohler, age 5. Sid has held many positions in the Optimist Club and was president in 1989 when our Bismarck Optimist Club was recognized as #1 in the DMM. So please give a warm welcome to Mr. Sid Stewart. Next we have Vern Dosh. Vern is the president and CEO of National Information Solutions Cooperative. NISC provides billing, accounting, and engineering software solutions to more than 835 rural utilities and telephone companies, and 14 million end customers in 50 states, American Samoa, Palau, and Canada. With offices in Mandan, North Dakota, Lake St. Louis, Missouri, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and Shawano, Wisconsin, Blacksburg, Virginia, and Austin, Texas. NISC employs more than 1,350 highly skilled employees. Dosh, a lifelong resident of Bismarck, Mandan, holds a Bachelor of Science degree and a Master of Management degree from the University of Mary and resides in Bismarck with his wife, Lynn. Vern and Lynn have 3 grown children, Zachary, Brittany, and Jordan, and 5 grandchildren. Vern is also the author of the book, Wired Differently. So please welcome Vern Dosh. And next we have our third panelist, Dr. Larry Scogan. Dr. Larry Scogan became president of Bismarck State College on March 1st, 2007. Retired from a career in the U.S. Air Force, he is a native of Hettinger, North Dakota. Dr. Scogan holds degrees from Dickinson State University with a BS in secondary education, University of Central Missouri, from Warrensburg with a master's in history, and also Arizona State University with a PhD in history. Throughout his career, he has been involved in education as a high school teacher and as a college instructor and administrator in a variety of military and civilian institutions, including the United States Air Force Academy. Dr. Scogan is the author of a legal history of federal Indian policy that was published by the University of Oklahoma Press, as well as articles and reviews in historical journals. So let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Scogan. Okay, and so how this will work, I have a few questions for you gentlemen to kick this thing, get this thing going, and then at the very end we'll have about 15 minutes of Q&A. So let's get things going here. First question, how has optimism impacted your life personally and professionally?
Do I have an hour?
Half an hour.
Half an hour?
No.
Okay. Well, I think that, I know that optimism and being optimistic is vital to one's whole attitude about life. I think, you mentioned the Air Force Academy, and I'll just tell one quick story and pass it on because this kind of represents what I'm talking about is the Air Force Academy. How many of you have been to the Air Force Academy? Yeah? It's beautiful, right? It is unbelievable. I went there with my parents. I was probably about 14 years old, and wow, what a place, And I wasn't smart enough to actually get accepted to the Air Force Academy, so I came in the servants entrance as a faculty member. And I got there, and I thought, wow, this is going to be great. And I got there, and oh my, I'd stand around talking to faculty members that were complaining, and they had all the answers. They were upset about this, and it was just, the whole thing was negative. And I said, I can't believe this. I'm living my dream here, and people are negative. And so, I really determined then and in other times in my life that just wasted energy. And so instead, I just wanted to be optimistic, and I was optimistic. I had a wonderful time there, and I just disassociated myself from that negativism. And I think all of us do that want to be optimistic, because you just have to disassociate yourself from that negativism, and it affects your whole attitude of life and the way you interact with people and how you perform your job. So that's a long answer. But
I agree with you, Larry. And not only affects your career and your job, but I think it affects your health. I think it has a huge impact on your health. I mean, I think about optimism in my life, and my career started at Capital Electric, where Wes works, about 45 years ago. And we had this notion to build this software company. And, Bismarck Mandan is not the technology mecca of the United States. And if you think you're going to build a technology company here, you better be an optimist. And the truth is, we were, maybe naively, optimistic. But, today I look at what NISC has become, and I know it's because of the optimism of our board, it's the optimism of our employees, the determination of our employees to build a company like NISC has become. But, when Jerry called me and asked me to be a part of this panel, the thing that I thought about, and the reason that I said yes, that I would come and be a part of it, is because I think your creed, and I'm looking at it again this morning, I mean, if there ever was a time when our country needed to adhere to and read this creed every morning, it's now. I mean, I think the relevancy of the Optimist Club is probably more relevant today than it's ever been. I mean, when I see things like to talk health, happiness, and prosperity to every person you meet, to look at the sunny side of everything, to think only of the best, to work only for the best. I mean, I think our world would be a much better place if more people adhere to your code. So, yeah, I mean, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm here to affirm the attitude that you bring into the communities where you live.
First off, I'm honored to be up here with these two because radio has a hard time getting any respect. Because we really don't have a real job, right? We just kind of do radio stuff, and luckily that's worked out really well for me. But when I decided to go into the radio business way back when, I told my parents, and my dad said, well, don't you think you should really get a real job? Try to do something where you could make some money. And I said, well, I want to give this a go. I thought it was worth a try. And I remember I'm from a generation that we felt we needed to start, from the ground and work our way all the way to the top, go through every job that you could get before you could get what you deserved at the end, was real money, and you had to work hard and you had to earn it. So I got out of school and had all the licenses I needed to get, and my first opportunity was to work midnight to 6. And what I learned from that is that a lot of people have or take medications, can't sleep, need a friend, and so that was interesting. I got to be more of a therapist of sorts, but and so I remember coming in to get my first paycheck, and I came to the lady at the desk and I said, "I'm Sid Stewart. I'm here to get my paycheck." And she goes, "Do you even work here?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm the midnight to 6 guy." Oh, okay. Well, we usually don't meet them. I said, "Okay, so." But anyway, starting out, it wasn't very positive, and I think I had to be optimistic about the fact that, there was a future in this business for me. And even way back when, people said, "Well, do you really think radio is going to be around? I mean, there's so much new technology. Do you think there's a future in it?" And, here I am 43 years later in the business, and radio, I think, is as strong as ever. Has it changed and molded and melded itself to be relevant in the world? It sure has. And have a lot of other options come along? Yeah, they sure have. But you have to be positive. You have to be optimistic about all your opportunities and how you're going to move through life. And I found that radio has offered me the opportunity to be involved in community service, to support different organizations, to not only have my own agenda for what I think is a positive way to move the community forward, but I've been able to use my job, my business, to help others do the same as well. So I'm very optimistic about what the world has to offer for all of us, and I think radio will be around long after I am. I hope so, and I could speak more on that, but like I was saying to these gentlemen earlier today, when you ask a radio guy a yes or no question, that's usually about a 10-minute answer, so I'll pass this for now.
Okay, our next question is, who is someone that you consider to be a role model when it comes to optimism?
When life is good, it's really easy to be an optimist, right? When you're healthy and your family's healthy and you got the job that you've always wanted or the job of your dreams and all that sort of stuff, and life is going good, and you can say, "I'm an optimist. Everything's going great. I don't have to, I don't have to be drugged down by negativity because my life is really good." And so what the folks that I see, Jerry, that I'm really impressed with, and in fact, I brought a book along today, and I'm not going to read from it, but I just wanted to talk a little bit. You want to hold my water? I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because I was thinking about the whole thing of optimism. And again, to repeat myself, when life is good, it's easy to be optimistic. And I don't know how many of you remember the last lecture by Randy Pausch. Anybody remember that? And there's a book that was published. This guy had pancreatic cancer, and he was a faculty member at Carnegie Mellon. And if you have not watched his lecture or read his book, I recommend you do it. This guy is dying of cancer. He's just been given months to live. And he talks about being optimistic. And he talks about taking control of your life. And I think, okay, I can say I was an optimist, for example, at the Air Force Academy, because my life was perfect. But when your life's not perfect, to be an optimist is a lot of work. And I would say Randy is somebody that really personified that. And if you haven't watched it, or the video or read his book, I recommend it. And I will say on a very personal, when my youngest son was 21, he was diagnosed with cancer. And he was in the military, and he was hospitalized at Bethesda, the big naval hospital in Washington, D.C. And I flew out there with him, and he'd gone through a number of where they said, "Well, we'll do surgery, and that'll take care of it." He said, "Okay." So he went to the surgery, came back, and they said, "Well, that didn't take care of it. Now we're going to have to do this." And it was something else. And then they said, "Well, now we're going to have to do chemotherapy and something else." And every time you'd say, "Okay, whatever, And so I was out there with him, and he was doing his chemotherapy. He had lost all his hair. He was going through all that sort of stuff. And we actually went out sightseeing that day. And I said, son, I am so proud of you. You have such a wonderful attitude about all this. And he said, Dad, what's my choice? And I learned there what optimism is from my youngest son. Because sometimes you don't have a choice, and you just have to get through it. And he got through it, and today it's, 15 years later, he's got 3 beautiful children, and he's a wonderful father and a wonderful young man. And so that's where I learned it, and those are the folks that I admire.
So when I think about the person that influenced me in terms of his optimistic attitude, it would be my father. My father grew up, his parents were immigrants. He grew up in the 30s, just really a poor family. And you're right, Larry. It's easy to be optimistic when things are going well, but in the 30s, boy, you really had to pull yourself up by the bootstraps to be optimistic. And he left the farm and was the first in his family to get a college degree. And his optimism, he was a man of few words. He didn't talk about it a lot, but he worked really hard. And he had this old saying that he would say, the best sermon is a good example. And his life, the way he worked, how selfless he was, and how optimistic he was that he could build a better life, not only for him and his family, but also for his kids. And that was his life. I mean, his life was an example to all of us of how you pull yourself up by the bootstraps. If when you work really hard, you can be optimistic about the future, because, optimism doesn't just happen by chance. You got to work at it, right? And he taught me that, and I'm grateful for that.
I'd have to say my parents as well, but it's interesting because I'd like to think we all can say that. But I enjoy the day-to-day meetings that I have with people in basic situations where you can gather something from them. If you've had a really good day and you're kind of telling everybody in the world what a great day you had, and other people wish you a really good day, and you find out later that they've had a really bad day. That says something to me. And that can be anybody on any given day. Going back to parents and things like that, my parents, we were raised on the ranch, like we said. Didn't know we were poor at the time. We used to raise a lot of rabbits. We ate a lot of rabbit. And it's interesting that rabbit and the Optimist Club have a correlation for me, because one time we were in Sioux Falls at an Optimist convention of sorts, and the luncheon at noon was rabbit. And we were all sitting at these big round tables, and I knew what it was immediately. Ate a lot of it. And I loved it. And people were looking for the wing and wondering, this is unusual drumstick kind of thing. And then somebody figured it out. It was rabbit. And some people just couldn't continue their meal. They just couldn't eat it. It was very good. But we lived on rabbit when I was a kid, and we thought we were rich. My dad, when we butchered rabbits, we didn't think anything of it, but we did have our cousins from Fargo drive in one time unexpectedly, and we were butchering rabbits. And you can only imagine that they're still getting over it. They were from the city, right? And we were like slaughtering Easter bunnies like there was no tomorrow. But my dad would tan the hides and sell the fur, and we would eat the meat, obviously, and then the guts would go into barrels that were hauled to Lemon, South Dakota, and sold to the mink farm. And we thought it was what everybody did. And you all have that story of your own. But I think, it just was all about, the wealth that you have in the moment that you're living it. It's not about being poor or rich or having more than the other guy or less or whatever, but we felt very loved, and we took that to the next level on our own.
Okay, next question. Tell us about a particular life experience when optimism helped carry you through.
I got lots of stories.
I gotta think.
Okay.
Go ahead. I can.
Well, I tell you what, the Missouri River right now is running fuller and faster and has pushed more water through the system than it did in the 2011 flood. The difference is it's been doing this all season long versus all at once, which is why the flood happened and the snowpack and all the things that we experienced back in 2011. But for all the devastation and all the things that people had to deal with, there was a community of people who came together. Our radio stations were in the floodplain. We had to create a mobile broadcasting center that we could put on a hill and stay on the air with, and we never did have to use it, but we had to prepare for it like so many other people. But, you know, there were neighbors coming together to help neighbors, and everybody felt that we'd get through it, and we did. Lots of people lost lots of things, you know, homes and physical things, but there were relationships that were broken because of it as well. And we would go around with our radio station vehicles and we would play music at sandbagging stations to try to help people stay positive about it. We delivered pizzas to sandbagging crews that were working in coordination with the local pizza places and so forth. But I mean, that was these literally months of trying to be positive when you were surrounded by negativity, quite frankly. The river was not very forgiving. And it was a period of time where I think, as terrible and nasty as it was a very positive experience for most of the community. And here we are today, and you, for the most part, probably wouldn't even think twice about it. But I remember my wife and I, we lived in a little rental unit ended up to be 3.5 years. It was supposed to be 12 months, because we'd sold our house. And we were going to build on the river, the land that we bought many years before, and we were finally going to build our dream home on the river. And we were going to break ground on June 1st, and May 23rd, the flood came. So obviously that didn't happen. We had lived in that 800 square foot house for 3.5 years, and our master bedroom in the house that we sold was 1,000 square feet. So we learned to get along pretty well.
So when I think about being an optimist, the event that comes to mind is, so we're a technology company, we're a software company, and if you want to strike fear into a software company, you say you need to rewrite your software. In other words, you need to step back, redo the software, and by the way, keep your business going that you have. That will strike fear into the heart of any technical employee. Well, that was a case that we were facing. Our software was at a place where it needed to be rewritten. We put a plan together. We had the financing. We had the approval from our board. But we knew that we were betting the farm, as they say here in North Dakota. We knew that if this would not be successful, that it probably would take our company down. And there was an article out of Forbes magazine that came out right at the same time. And the title of the article was that 75% of all large software development projects fail. So we were betting the farm, and we had a 75% chance of failure. And I remember standing in front of the employee group saying, we've got board approval, we've got the financing, it's up to us to do this. And I had butterflies because I wasn't sure if we could pull it off. But, in my position, it was my responsibility to show optimism, confidence. And, that was a $300 million project that absolutely changed the face of NISC and allowed us to grow into the company we are today. But that, every employee was looking at us saying, is this a good thing? Can we trust you? Can we be successful? And so optimism, even when I wasn't positive, was absolutely required at that moment.
So as I've been listening and thinking, I suppose we can all come up with a lot of challenges we've had in our lives. I mentioned my youngest son having cancer, and so health scares in your family, and it takes some optimism to get through those. A couple of years ago, we had a 20% budget cut at all the state agencies in Bismarck State College. We ended up with 52 people fewer at the end of the year by the time we went through the budget cuts. And to Vern's point, when you're the leader, you've got to be optimistic, and you've got to go into these meetings and say, we're going to get through this, everybody. We just got to work on it, and we got to get through it. And it's really tough. There's no doubt about that. But so I could come up with a whole list of things that they were hard times, and we had to step up, and and being in leadership positions, you have to set the tone in the room that we can do this, and we can be optimistic about this, or we can be positive about it, stuff like that. So rather than go through that whole list, that took me a long time to say, I'm not going to do that. So rather, I'll tell you one quick story, and I think Jerry's actually heard this story. The life-changing thing for me professionally was getting accepted to officers training school. I had a family. I was a young enlisted guy. I'd gotten out of the service. I went to Dickinson State as well. I'd gotten my degree, and I went back in the Air Force. And what was going to change my life, and I knew it was going to change my life, was becoming an Air Force officer, because it just opened up a lot of doors that as an enlisted guy, I did not have those doors. And so I really wanted to be an officer. And I won't go through the whole litany of this with you, but you get to meet 4 boards. You can meet a board, get accepted to officers training school, and your life's going to change. If you don't get accepted, you can meet the next board, and you can do it 4 times. And after the 4th board, if you don't make it, you can't apply anymore. They figure, well, by then, you're not going to be an Air Force officer, and so you just well go do something else. And so I went to the 4th board. And I'm going to tell you, the optimism, because it took a year to go from denied that opportunity at the 1st board to put the whole package together, and to go to the 2nd board, and then put the whole package together and go to the 3rd board, and then walk in and having that 4th board, and if you don't make it, it's over. And I can tell you, I had the most fixated grin on my face to say that, yes, I'm still optimistic here. I'm still going to do this, and I'm still going to make it. And so I got accepted by the 4th board, and I went on, and that's the reason today I'm a college president, because through that process then opened the doors for me to go on and get graduate degrees, to go on to get a PhD. I did all that while I was in the Air Force, to teach at the Air Force Academy, and then therefore to be qualified to apply to Bismarck State College. So had I not been accepted by that 4th board, I would have had a completely different life path, and I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you today.
Okay, next we have, how do you deal with someone who is a pessimist?
Talk to the hands.
Avoid them. No, I mean, don't. They say, you surround yourself with optimistic people, right? And that has a chance, opportunity to rub off on you. And I don't know about you, but you get around some people that are so pessimistic, and you feel like they just suck the energy right out of you. And I mean, honestly, I truly do try to avoid them. I just can't deal with it.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same boat. We kind of are in a position to have to do the radio thing, and it's like when the switch or the light goes on, it's like you jump into this other personality no matter what's going on in your life. So I think for the most part, like all of us, we probably avoid those people, and if anything, we gather those together that make us feel the way we want to feel, and we steamroll the other guy, I suppose, with goodwill. But yeah, I can't really answer that short of just saying I avoid them.
Yeah. I will say, and I was being a bit facetious when I said avoid them, but I think in my place and in my career today, the thing that probably gives me the greatest satisfaction is the opportunities I have to coach a lot of our employees, particularly the younger employees, plenty of millennials. And one of the most gratifying things is to be able to sit down with a young person that maybe doesn't have the most optimistic view on life and be a part of helping them understand why we have an awful lot to be thankful for and optimistic about. And so I wouldn't give up on them, but there does come a point in time with some people where you just say, I'm just going to move on, right?
No, I agree with everything that was said. There are people, I think, that are genetically pessimistic, and I just don't know what you do. You've got, and it's very, very difficult. But back to what we were talking about in leadership, I think setting the stage and being optimistic and trying to present that as your public face to your organization and to the public at large. You can get some of them to come along, even the most pessimistic. You can get them to come along, but there are those that are genetically pessimistic, and I don't know that there's anything you can do about it. I agree with Vern. Sometimes you just have to say this one's a lost cause, and we need to move on.
And the pessimist convention takes place next week at a different hotel.
Nobody will show up.
And fifth question before we open it up to the audience here. Why is optimism important in today's world?
So now I'm going to be a historian. Arthur Schlesinger Jr., great historian. His father was actually a great historian as well. In fact, so all the work, those of us that are called doctors, all the work we go through to get that. By the way, my kids used to say our dad's a doctor, but it doesn't do anybody any good. But you think about all the work you go through for a dissertation. Arthur Schlesinger Jr. wrote his master's thesis, and it got published. It's a great book called The Age of Jackson, and he became a professor. He went straight from working on his master's degree to being a professor and wrote wonderful books, and he was really a bright, productive historian. Anyway, he said, the study of history is a great antidote against believing you live in the worst of times. And so we are some of us, in our times, we look at the pessimism and the gutter politics, the lack of respect, all of these things that I'm sure we all cringe at. And I'm not taking sides; it's happening on all sides, and just somehow our national conversation has really gone into the gutter, I think. But I'm an optimist, okay? Because Arthur Schlesinger Jr. said, well, look at the past. And those of us, and it looks like there's quite a crowd here, grew up in the 60s when our political leadership was being assassinated. And we were fighting a war where not just a few hundred soldiers, sailors, Marines are lost, airmen are lost, but thousands, tens of thousands are being lost in battle. You think about the Civil War that this country went through. You think of, we don't like the politics and the sniping that's going on. A representative by the name of Brooks went into the Senate chamber in the late 1850s with a cane, and he beat a senator from Massachusetts. He was from South Carolina, Brooks was. He took a cane in and he beat a guy, Senator Sumner from Massachusetts, and within an inch of his life, and broke the cane in the process. And hundreds of canes were sent to his office from Southerners that wanted him to beat more abolitionists. So you think about that, and you think, we're in pretty rough times. But as Arthur Schlesinger Jr. said, it's good antidote to look back and to say we're not living in the worst of times, and we can get through this too. And I think that requires some optimism.
Boy, Dr. Scogan, I agree with you. We have a tendency to feel entitled or victims, and I believe that we have all kinds of reasons to be optimistic. We live in a time of abundance. And in my life, I look at the 5 generations that I've been exposed to, and my grandfather, the life that he lived compared to my father was amazing. I mean, my dad was so much more successful financially and had a broader scope of the world and had a much easier life than my grandfather did. And I look at my life and the opportunities that I've had. I think my dad worked a lot harder than I did. But I have a much better life in terms of the things that I've been able to experience and do. And we hear conversations about, well, this is going to be the first generation that is worse off than their parents. I disagree. My kids are so much further along than I was when I was 25 and 30 years old, so much further along. And their kids are so much further along than they were. I'm optimistic. We live in a time of abundance. Dr. Scogan, you talked about going through World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. I mean, if you look at a statistic of violent deaths year by year by year, and you look at where we are today, now don't get me wrong, we have too many violent deaths, but it's a fraction of where we were during the world wars. I mean, we live in one of the most peaceful times of mankind. You wouldn't know that if you listen to, can I say the cable news networks? The cable news. Unfortunately, if it bleeds, it leads, and it always amazes me when I look at things that are trending on Twitter and Facebook. It's the awful things. It's the axe murder things. It isn't the wonderful things that people are doing and accomplishing, and for some reason, as human beings, we have a tendency to be a bit pessimistic. We have a tendency to be drawn towards the negative. And so that's why I think your organization is so important to emphasize the fact that we need to be positive, and we have reason to be positive and optimistic. I mean, if you go down all the metrics, whether it's poverty in the world, literacy in the world, life expectancy, I mean, every one of those metrics has changed dramatically just in our lifetime, and we have reason to be optimistic that it will be even better in the future. My grandfather, when he came into this country in 1900, his life expectancy was 50 years old. 50 years. And he lived till he was 92. In his lifetime, technology and medicine and advances allowed him almost to double his expectancy. I don't know. I think that's reason to be optimistic. So, I think that we have a tendency to be drawn towards the negative. And it's our responsibility to speak up and let the data show you that we have all kinds of reasons to be optimistic.
Yeah, I guess I don't like the alternative to not having an optimistic future to look forward to. So I got to believe that that's the way the world is going to go, but I don't think it's going to do that on its own. I think there has to be an education process, and they always talk about the millennials and how hard they are to figure out, and yet I have 2 daughters that are millennials, and they seem to have a lot of things figured out. So I'm very confident that the world will go in the right direction, and in the end it'll be the way we want it to be, in a positive way. I do think it starts, though, with everyone doing their part, from the youngest person to the oldest. And I think about the youngsters that are in junior achievement and volunteers that come to the classroom to teach them how to understand city government and where the electric bill comes from and how the water systems work and all those basic things that are part of the world and government. and how they can have a positive impact or possibly find a place for themselves in the world where they can contribute in a positive way. And you go from junior achievement to the Young Professionals Network, which I know Jerry knows very well. And you must be almost ready to be booted out of that. Are you at the age limit now? Or?
Just about.
Just about?
Just
That'll
about.
be unfortunate. But the young professionals, those are the people that learned those things in their schools, and now they have a opportunity to practice them in their workplace, and they're the up and comers. They're the people that are going to run the world and are running it in a lot of ways. And then from there they're involved in the chamber, and like locally the Mandan Business Organization, where they're trying to help support young entrepreneurs. It's all very positive, and there's stepping stones to get to those places, and I think we all have to be involved in that. And once people have done all those things and have grown up and didn't even know what happened, then all of a sudden, they're in a service club, and now it's old and young and male and female. And I remember the discussion we had many years ago about having females in our club, and it was such a big hoo-ha-ha. And boy, did we find out how wrong we were. I shouldn't say we. I was all for it. I want you to know. But when the gals came into the club, we had some of the older members that were grumpy as can be, and the whole club just got so much better, so much faster. It was amazing that we had been so stubborn about that as an organization. But that's how the world learns and grows, and now we are young and old and mixed together and having all these life experiences, and I think we are the difference. But we have to make it the difference we want. I don't think we can just hope it's going to turn out okay. Thank you.
I'd just like to add to what Vern was talking about, and Vern and I read many of the same books, and Factfulness is, and I forget the name of the author, remember who wrote it? Factfulness, I read it because Bill Gates said I ought to read it. But it gets to all those points that Vern was talking about, life expectancy and health in the world and violence in the world and all this sort of stuff, and it's a statistical analysis, but it's done very, very well, and it's really easy to read. And so those of you that want to be optimistic about the future, I recommend the book Factfulness, that will cover all those things that Vern was talking about.
Okay, very good. Well, at this time, we have a few minutes for some Q&A with the audience. So, is this thing on?
Not that one.
Nope. Another one? Okay. Too many microphones. So Tim will be walking around, and just jump up, raise your hand, and let's have some Q&A.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you've ever witnessed an event in your lives, and it's out there, that you see events turning so negative. One event after another, failure, that all of a sudden it turns positive. You came pretty close to it, and I'm just saying with your commission, we're going through that process, and then I'm just feeling vicariously how it must have been. That's a failure. I'm never going to make it. Geez, I've been through 2 boards or whatever, that kind of a feeling. Here I am at the closing, but I just kind of throwing it out there that there are events out there, and this is you see a real hard root of optimism, is that, a thing that is a total failure right in front of you, and it fails again. And another event plays along with that event, and it fails, but it turns so negative that all of a sudden it's positive, and you win it, or get it, or whatever it is. That kind of an experience, and I'm just interested in if you've seen it or experienced it.
Sid talked about the flood in 2011, and we live about 150 feet from the shoreline of the Missouri River. So our house was an island for 3 months, and number one, when the water started coming up, we were scared to death. We had never seen that before. I agree with Sid. The community was unbelievable. I mean, there were people helping us build a dike that I didn't even know their name. That was one of my biggest regrets, is that I didn't even know who they were to say thank you to them afterwards. But so we had the dike built, the house was an island. We started getting rain like crazy, and the challenge was not keeping the water out of the dike, but getting the water, the rainwater that was inside the dike back out. And you just, I mean, the flood was one thing, and then it started raining like crazy, and you thought, well, what else can go wrong? And then the wind really started blowing, and all the cottonwoods along the river started tipping over. And there was a point, I remember, in the little rowboat going away from the house one evening, after I had checked the pumps, thinking, we're never going to live in this house again. I don't think we're going to make it. And, the stubborn German in me was, it became a contest then, right? And we won, and the house was saved. And so exactly what you said, we went through almost a time of despair. And then it kind of went off into, we can beat this, we will beat this. And we did, and to this day we live 100 feet from the river.
I don't really have a question, but just chiming in on the pessimism thing, the biggest thing is that don't let a pessimist make you feel bad. You can't let them do that.
Come on, there must be some more questions out there for all these optimists. Does anyone have anything?
Is there a risk when you were mine and Hannah's age that you wish you would have taken?
Mm.
25. Give or take.
That I wished I had taken. I think about 40 years ago, when I was your age, I just felt like I took a lot of risks then, and I don't know that I would have. So my draft number was 282. Some will remember when they had draft numbers. My draft number was 282, which means I would have never been drafted during the Vietnam War, and I enlisted. People said, well, "Are you crazy?" But I just thought there was going to be some good opportunity. So I'm serving during the Vietnam War, and they sent me to Italy. Now there's optimism, and so I used to tell my cadets, and we got talking about the Vietnam War. I said, "Well, I fought it from Italy. I thought it was prudent." I fully, I served with a lot of people that served over there. My brother went over there, and I'm sure there's some folks in here that were over there. And it just, so I took the risk of enlisting, and it just turned out well for me. And I might be a different person. I don't know if I had been sent to Vietnam instead of Italy. I did learn how to make great pasta. But I don't know, I feel, when I look back on my life, I took a lot of risks. I don't know that there was one that I said, ooh, I'm going to completely avoid this risk. I kind of like taking the risks and seeing where it led us. And
I think the beauty of youth is that you're a little naive. We get a little older and we start getting practical and we start worrying about things. When I was 25, I had mentioned that I worked for Capital Electric, where Wes works. It's a great place. It's a fantastic place to work. It's secure. It's great benefits and everything. And I was considering the opportunity to go to work for this little startup software company that was struggling financially. What the heck was I thinking? Why would I leave a good job like that? And I remember talking to my dad about it, who was very practical, and and he said, "Are you crazy? Have you lost your mind?" And I did. Well, not lost my mind, but I went for the job, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that willingness to take a risk. I probably didn't understand all the ramifications of what could have gone wrong. And the lesson I learned from that is today, our kids, you know, for as the dad to be able to go, okay, so I wouldn't do it, but okay, because I remember when my dad didn't agree with me, to give them that latitude of saying, you're young, take a risk. You know what? If it doesn't work out, you have time to recover, you have time to, you know, regroup. But as a dad who defied his father and made some decisions that he did not agree with, I have to remember to allow my kids that same latitude.
You know, I completely agree, because my thoughts would be as well to the fact that it's easy to take risks for someone else. And so you always have all the advice in the world coming from people that don't have to actually live it, right? And so, but when it comes to your kids, my two daughters are 30 and 34, and through their lives they had to make decisions that were really big decisions for them, but they were so focused on the actual choice that they wanted to make that they really didn't kind of rationally look at all the options that were available and what the outcome would be, good, bad, or otherwise. And so as a parent, you help them walk through all that so that they can get a better sense of the focus that they need to be taking, knowing that either way, they're going to be okay. You know, I've told my one daughter, who is a doctor, I told her when she was struggling at, you know, she's been in school for 10 years, for God's sakes. And her friends are, you know, got a new car and they've got a job. They've been in for 5 or 6 years, and her day is yet to come because she's now finishing her residency. But I told her, I said, on your absolute worst day, you're probably 95 to 99% better off than most people in the world. On your worst day, when you think everything's going to hell, you are still smarter, more capable, more able to do anything you want than most people, because you're just that person. So sometimes the decisions aren't so monumental as they are the fact that you just need to talk to someone that can kind of help you rationalize them. So, and you know, I'm hoping to get free medical care.
If I can add to that too, you know, I think you know, in talking to young people, I think that success requires risk. I don't know how somebody can live in a world that's completely comfortable, no risks, no laying in bed at night, tossing and turning, wondering, okay, now do I go down this lane or go down that lane? If you just want to be comfortable, I don't know any successful person that didn't take risks. So I highly recommend risks, and they're not all going to work. There's going to be risks that you take that folks that fall flat on their face. But my view is that if what you're going to do is not illegal, immoral, or unethical, take a risk. And, you know, if it's one of those three, it's probably not going to work out. It might work out in the short term, but it's not going to work out in the long term, that's for sure.
Very good. We still have a few minutes for any other questions. Does anyone have anything?
First off, thank you guys very much for coming and spending your Saturday morning with us. You're all very fun to listen to and obviously hear some of your stories and things. But one question, I know a lot in my life I like quotes or things that I try to live by. And if I'm going through something, I'm like, oh, focus on this. And there's a certain quote or a certain mantra or something that I repeat, or I tell myself, like, it's okay, I'll make it through it. This is what I try to live by. Do you guys have anything that you kind of repeat to yourself, or something that comes to mind when you're going through something that you try to focus on to get through the experience or the situation that you might be in?
That's a perfect question for me, because I do have that quote, and I used it at the Air Force Academy with cadets that were struggling. I used it. I was vice president of military school in New Mexico, and I got up in front of the whole corps of cadets, and I gave them this quote, and I think about it often, and it's a Henry Ford quote. And you have to listen carefully now. If you think you can, or you think you can't, you're right. And to me, that's being the optimist, is to think I can and to take on the challenges. And I have left that, thanks to Henry Ford, I have left that with thousands of cadets over the years.
So in our organization, we have about 1,400 employees in there in 23 states, and we've got this voluminous policy manual that has been developed over the years that mainly has been developed because some employee acted badly or whatever, and we had to put a policy in place, and now it's punitive for the other employees, and I hate it. If it would be up to me, we'd throw it all out. So what I say to the employees, and they've heard me say this 1,000 times, probably more, is, just do the right thing always. Do the right thing always. And they're in situations where they have to make decisions, snap decisions, and it might be against policy, but we're trying to take care of the customer, or we're trying to take care of our colleagues. And I will say, in 30 years, no one has been fired for doing the right thing always. It hasn't always turned out the way they hoped. It wasn't always the right decision, but their intentions were good, and we honored that.
I'm kind of a buck stops here kind of guy, I guess. I feel that, if I'm gonna kind of stop putting in the effort I need to put in, then why would I expect anyone else to go the distance as well? I've always felt that at the end of the day, if I can make one more appointment or one more call that isn't going to, that could possibly make a difference, that I should do that. And I shouldn't expect everybody that works for me or with me to do that. If I don't think that way, if I don't take that other step, if I don't make that extra effort, why in the world would anybody else that's near me or around me or working with me or following me do that? So I grab a shovel when it's time to dig a hole, and everybody else does too. And it's a pretty simple process. My father told me once, he said, if you have to think for a second whether something's right or wrong, you have the answer. So that's where I'm at, I guess.
My quote's printed on the back of your books. I always say, promise yourself. I just recite the creed whenever something's going bad. It works.
We have time for one more question. One more. Is there anything out there? Going once? Going twice? Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you all so very much for taking the time out of your Saturday. I think I speak for this room when I say that your words of wisdom on optimism have truly been uplifting, inspirational for all of us. So thank you for sharing your stories and your time. Let's give Dr. Scogan, Vern, and Sid a round of applause.